In this video, we'll be looking at the system requirement specification document. What actually goes into this document and the purpose of this document. First off, the purpose of this document, and this one I've taken straight out of the MIL Standards 962E. It says the overall purpose of a specification is to provide a basis for obtaining a product or service that will satisfy a particular need or at an economical cost and invite maximum reasonable competition. So what it's really saying here is it will enable us to actually meet this particular need, obtain this particular product or service or whatever it is, and invite people to potentially tender for this as well. Once we've actually worked out what all our needs and requirements are, and that's the central component of this systems requirement specification document. So what should actually go into the requirement specification document? Well, there's a few different standards available to us, more than just the ones that we've got listed here. But these are some of the common ones. The Defence Standard 81431, the Space Engineering Standard ECSS-E10A, and two MIL standards, which are 961E and 490A. Now, the last one's now superseded standard, but still contains some useful information to us. So there isn't just one way that we can go about creating our requirement specification document. There's multiple, and it really depends on if a company or a department, like a Department of Defence, insists on a specific standard that must be followed. Having said that, many contain similar sort of information, and according to all these, requirements is this central pillar of what a requirement specification document is all about. Actually getting those requirements down and the data around those requirements. Things like verification data, how we're actually going to test if a requirement's been met, and the traceability that we can understand why a requirement fits in and how it flows from higher level requirements. So for the purpose of this subject, we'll create somewhat of an abridged requirement specification document. It won't be hundreds of pages long, it will be significantly shorter. And here's the sort of things that should go into your requirement specification document. You should start off with a cover page and a table of contents explaining what's actually in the document. You should then have a bit of a system overview describing the purpose of the system and a description of the system domain. So what is the business involved in? Why do they need this? Where does all that fit in? Where is the system going to live? Now, if required, you might have some sections discussing all the acronyms in the document, the definitions in the document, and any reference documents that you might be referring to. You also have your requirements breakdown structure, and this is your hierarchical view showing a tree structure of where all the requirements fit in. Super important to have that front and center. That's really what this requirement specification document is built around. Now, supplementing that, because that only basically gives us a view of the requirements, it doesn't go through all the detail of the requirements, we need a detailed list of the requirements, including things like the hierarchy with the naming structure with primary keys and requirement 1 and 1.1 and so on. The originator of the requirement, where it came from, the priority, risk, the history of that particular requirement, the type and the interface, what it actually physically would maybe revolve around. Then the data relating to performance, verification and rationale. Why is it there? How are we going to test it? And what performance do we need to hold this requirement standard up to? We probably also have a division there, or at least a listing, defining whether our requirements are functional or non-functional requirements. We looked at that previously. Now, in the process that we've been following, you'll be given some requirements in the form of a business needs and requirements document and a stakeholder needs and requirements document. There'll be top-level requirements and won't contain all the requirements. And so through your system engineering, elicitation and decomposition and derived requirements processes, we need to include a whole lot more requirements. Like, and I put like in bold because some of these won't apply for your particular domain, but things like external interfaces that the system needs to interface to, maybe three-phase power, or maybe it needs water or air or something like that. Safety requirements, and security and privacy requirements, particularly if we're dealing with confidential information, or maybe information about people that they've provided with some sort of understanding of confidentiality. Communications requirements between different parts of the system, data storage requirements and backup requirements, what happens if the system goes down, recovery and things like that, computer requirements and computing needs and things like that, the environment that the system is going to be operating in, quality test factors, personnel requirements, training requirements, particularly for those personnel, logistics requirements, all of these sort of things come together, and they're extra requirements that particularly they might be derived requirements or decomposed requirements. We look at the top level requirements and say, hang on a sec, you need this, 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 and this. And they're taken from the IPSC standard 81431A, just as samples. And so you can look there for a more detailed listing of what they actually all are and some of the sample requirements that you might find in each of those. My suggestion for this detailed listing of requirements would be the sort of spreadsheet listing that we listed earlier, where we list the actual requirement as a requirement statement, and we've got the performance statement, the verification statement, and the rationale statement of why it's actually there. That gives you a bit of an overview of the system requirement specification document and should start you along the way of actually creating your own for the assignment.